let's start our lecture today. Please turn on your camera. Okay. Please turn on your camera before we can start our lecture. Okay, thank you. Now, today we will discuss the topic of data requirements. In your project, I mean the assignment, the ongoing assignment that you were dealing with now, you need now to start to looking at what's the data required to be captured and to be stored. Okay, so how we know that that's the topic of today's lecture. So let me start by sharing you my slides, okay, and later I'll show you based on my previous experience what kind of data being captured by a real life system. Okay, so this is structuring system data requirement. Okay, so basically data requirement means you need to create a conceptual data modeling. Why conceptual? Because we will not deal with the implementation of that data model. With implementation of data model, we need to think about stuff like the performance, how many people will use that. So the more people using that, the bigger computing power we need. How many data will be captured and processed every day. The bigger the data, the bigger storage media we require. And with regards to storage media, we need to consider performance versus price. Obviously, if if we look at the performance, the faster storage media we use is usually more expensive, and not every application will require speedy data storage. Some only require the one that access now and then or infrequently, will not need faster data storage. We can address this in many ways. For example, take a look at the example of Instagram. How many of you actually looking at or watching the pictures that posted 2 years ago? Probably not many. Okay, so those kind of picture will be stored by Instagram in the slower storage media, while the newest picture, the one that you posted this morning, for example, will be stored in faster storage media. Okay, so when the picture Instagram is no longer frequently accessed, it will be moved to slower media storage. Okay, so that's the trade-off, if you like, between performance faster and also the capacity bigger. Okay, so but we don't deal with that now. We will deal with the conceptual data modeling. This is the detailed model that captures the overall structure of data in organization. Okay. And regardless of the technology, regardless of the programming language, regardless of the devices that use, data is always independent. Okay, take a look at your academic data. Your academic data are shared among few institutions. First, obviously, our faculty use your academic data, but then also the government use that academic data. Okay, they have a different application, they are different system, but still using the same data. Okay. So we are here at the analysis stage. Okay. So what we need to do with conceptual data modeling, we develop a new data model for the current system. And also we develop a new conceptual data model that includes all requirements of the new system. So we model the data for the existing system, and also we model the data for the new system. What's that the difference between the existing or the old and the new? Obviously, we need to looking back at the reason why we replaced the old system with the new system, because the old system could no longer provide information required by the user. So obviously, the old data model will have less data compared to the newest data model. Okay. We'll start. So the way or the tools to use to draw or to create data model is called entity relationship diagram, or ER diagram. Okay. Probably still remember this from your AIS class or MIS class. Okay. So this is the model. Okay. The box represent entity type. Entity type means everything that you want to record the data from the organization. Which thing that need to be recorded, it depends on the organization. Some organization may record differently. Okay. For example, a small store, mom and pop store, for example, or a convenience store down the road from your home, owned by family business, they probably will not have credit sales record, so they will need credit sales entity type, but they do have cash sales entity type, things like that. Okay, so what are the secondary deliverables? The first is basically the data model. The second deliverable is set of entries about data objects to be stored in repository. Okay, so we need to identify the element of data that will be available in the model. Okay. How we use to model the data? There are two approaches, top-down and bottom-up. But I'll give you another example that probably will be easier to create data model. First, we will will use the input process output diagram. If you remember that a system having data as an input, being processed, and then having information as the output. So we start from the information as the output, and then we go back to the data required for creating those information. So we need to ask the stakeholder what kind of information they need from the system. Okay. What kind of information they need for their daily task or their routine operation. What those information are required for to make decision, or is it just some information or any other purpose for that information. So, for example, a store owner probably required information about how many cash they received today and how many cash they expense that day. Store owner probably require information on how many products are still in inventory and how many need to be bought from their supplier next day. So we identify those information requirement, and then we look at the element of that information and try to find where those information could come from. For example, inventory. Inventory could come from two sources, sales data and also purchase data, sales of product and also sales of product, things like that. Okay, so then we can infer what kind of data required from the information needed by the stakeholder. Okay, so again, also we could identify all those information that want to be recorded. Only information that need to be recorded as essential part of business need to be held. Otherwise, it will be waste of time and also resources to record something that won't be used. Okay, so we need to identify what kind of entity and also the description, the attributes of that entity. Again, one entity probably have so many attributes, but not all those attributes need to be recorded. For example, you, student as entity, there are plenty of attributes attached to you as a student. You have name, you have date of birth, place of birth, address, your grades, subject you have taken, subject you are taking now, your hobby, your favorite food, your favorite leisure time activities, things like that. But for the university, your favorite food is not an attribute that need to be recorded. It's irrelevant to the academic process. But your grades, the subject that you have taken, the subject that you failed in the past, the subject that you will be taking in the future, that's attributes that relevant to university. Okay. So those kind of information usually need to be found by having a discussion with the stakeholder. What they need. Do they really need something like that? And sometimes between each stakeholder, they don't agree on some issue. For example, during my work at the Ministry of Home Affairs with PNPM, the World Bank and the government of Indonesia actually having the differences. The government of Indonesia believed at the time when the project was still ongoing in 2011 and 2012, 2013, the government, the Indonesian government, especially the Ministry of Home Affairs, starting the eKTP project. That the government tried to come up with a system where the citizen of Indonesia have single identification number, NIK. So they started that project, and you probably still remember, although it's 9 or 10 years ago, that it was a huge deal. Plenty of plenty of corruption cases emerged from that project. It's trillion rupiah project, so naturally it attracts a lot of bad actors. Anyway, the reason why the government of Indonesia will use the single identification number NIK is because in the past, one person could have more than one KTP. You could apply KTP in Yogyakarta, and then you can move to Surabaya, for example, and apply another KTP. And plenty of bad things could emerge from this double identity, multiple identity card. So the government tried to fix that problem by issuing single identity, which is currently going rather good, if I may say, but 10 years ago, that was not the case. So, with PNPM, the program need to identify who the citizen that will receive the benefit from the program. Okay. So the government of Indonesia at that time, obviously, because the government at that time were building NIK, they proposed to use NIK as the identity. But the World Bank did not believe in NIK. They didn't trust that would be sufficient for identifying the recipient of the program benefits. So the World Bank created their own identity number. It's different from your case, where even though you have NIK, the university is still creating a new identity for you, which is the student ID. That's different from because with NIK, the university could not identify your program, could not identify your class, and could not identify you as a person. NIK only identify you as a person, but could not identify your program and also could not identify the year you were admitted to the university or your class. So that's a problem with NIK in university setting. But in the World Bank versus the government of Indonesia case, NIK is actually useful. The problem was the World Bank did not trust that. They said that it's not unique enough. The system at that time was still in the development phase, still on the early phase. So plenty of people haven't received their eKTP yet, for example. Okay. So that's become a problem at the time, and it has to be resolved. So at the time, what the solution was, the government of Indonesia still use NIK and the World Bank still use their own ID. Yeah. There is no compromise at that, and it's actually working quite well because they use it for different purposes. The government of Indonesia use that for delivering the program benefit. The World Bank use that for reporting. And it actually quite similar because the identity created by World Bank is based on NIK. So NIK plus something that would be equal to the government, the World Bank identity. So in a sense, it's still the same. How do you use the data? Security control and user access privilege. Could you access somebody else's data? How to prevent unauthorized user accessing the data. For example, in your case with your academic record, whenever you log on into Siatma, you can see your own academic data. I could not. All the lecturers in Atmajaya could not see your academic records. We have to request that to the faculty. Okay. So that's security control and user access privilege. You cannot change your grade, for example. Things like that. And over what period of time you're interested in data? It means that when we should always keep the data as active and when we should move the data into other storage. Some government regulation required certain type of data being held for certain period of time. For example, all transaction data should be kept for at least 10 years for tax purposes in Indonesia. Okay. In many companies now, especially with the social media, a lot of our data were not deleted. It exists as long as the company exists. Why? Because they have plenty of storage media, and keeping your data is always a good practice. Okay, that's why, for example, in the European Union, the EU governments introduced General Data Protection Regulation, which mandated all social media to delete user data upon request. So if I ask Google to delete all my data, Google has to comply that in European Union countries. So how to gather the information for data modeling? Similar to other requirements, you ask the stakeholder, look at the documentation, you observe the process, things like that. So similar to others. We use entity relationship. I will not go into detail in entity relationship because it will be covered if you are interested. It will be covered in depth with the elective subject database management system. Okay, you can pick that elective if you are interested in database management system. Okay, so this is some good practice in naming entity types. It has to be singular noun, descriptive and specific to organization. For example, we do not at this time, we do not in university do not differentiate between undergraduate students and postgraduate students. Okay, we just call them students. Okay, it has to be concise and it has to be agreed upon by all the stakeholders. And then we need to define those entity types. It should include statement of which unique characteristic. For example, for student they have NPM, the student ID, the lecturer will have employee ID. Okay, and then make clear what entity instance are included in an entity type. For example, what is student? Okay, what if a student enroll in an undergraduate program, graduated, and then enroll in postgraduate program? What happened with that? What if a student move to another program in the middle of their academic year? Things like that. Okay. And naming should be consistent. If we use student ID for one application, we should also use the same definition and name student ID in other application. Okay. Attributes, again, this is the property of characteristic then entity that of interest to the organization. So it's relevant to the system. Okay. Attributes should be unique within that entity. And it has to follow standard format, and also similar attributes of different entity types should use similar but distinguished name. Okay. So an attribute should be defined, state what the attribute is and possibly why it is important. Okay. Should make it clear what is included and not included. Content analysis or alternative name if it's apparently need to be replaced, and state the source of value for the attribute. For example, student ID. Who created student ID? Not the student, obviously. Student name. Where the student name came? Obviously, it has to be came from the student itself. Grade or mark. Who can provide the data for student grades? Is obviously the lecturer, not the student, not the administrative staff. Okay, it has to be the lecturer of that particular subject. Okay, that's why if there is some change need to be done to student's grade, it has to be done by the lecturer and nobody else. Okay. If, for example, I made mistake in submitting my grade, it has to be me who created or proposing the changes, and I have to make a written statement on why I changed the grade. Nobody else could, not even Pak Rektor. Okay. Now, this is identifier. I will not go into that. And some attributes have multi-valued attributes. For example, hobby. Hobby will have more than one value. Okay, so, and also attribute will have required attribute that must have a value for every instances. Name, for example, all students have to supply their names. All students has to supply their address. Okay. Optional, you may supply the data or not. Okay. Composite attribute is attribute that has meaningful component parts, for example, date and time. Derived attribute whose value can be computed from related attribute value. For example, age. Somebody age could be derived from their date of birth. Your GPA. Your GPA could be derived from all the subjects you have taken with their grades. Okay, and there will be formula for that. Relationship is association between entity. For example, there are unary relationship, a relationship between the same entity. Binary relationship, this is relationship between two entities. And also ternary relationship, this is a relationship between three entities. And there is cardinality. Cardinality is number of instances of entity B that can or must be associated with instance of entity A. There are minimum and maximum. There are mandatory and optional cardinalities. Okay, so let's see this. This is mandatory cardinality. Patient has to have patient history or medical record. Each patient has one patient history and could have as many as possible. One patient history will belong to only one patient. So that's it. Our associative entity is, I'll skip this because that important. Okay, so let me show you this picture. Now, before I move to the picture, is there any question about the data? Your next assignment, I will not put it, you don't need to submit anything yet now, but for next week, I need you to present what kind of information required by the user of your application. Okay, so what information is needed by your user and what the information are for. For example, if a store owners need information about inventory, okay, what's that information I use for? Oh, I need the information of inventory to make decision on how many inventory I need to purchase from my supplier. Okay. I need information about sales made by a certain salesperson. Why I need that information? To calculate the commission for that particular salesperson. So that kind of information and also the use of that information. I need you to make a list and present it to the class next week. Okay, so you need to prepare. You don't need to submit anything, but you need to prepare presentation on that. Okay? Any question about that? Okay. So let me share you this picture. So this is the data model for the PNPM project. Okay, let me see if I can make it bigger. So if you can see, let's take this one example. So this one, this is the entity called layanan kesehatan. So the name of the entity is S layanan kesehatan. Okay, and this is the attributes. There are 3 attributes: jenis layanan kesehatan code, jenis layanan kesehatan name, and jenis layanan kesehatan status. These are the attributes, and the one with key icon here is this is the key attribute. The word here that you can see here, this is the data type. Char means character, varchar means variable character. Okay. Let's see another tahapan pelelangan. This is another entity type. The key for that is THP lelang ID, and the attributes are these. Okay. And you may see there are line connecting from one entity to another. This is the relationship. Okay. If I'm not mistaken, there are 160 entity for this system alone. Okay. So this is example of a real data modeling for a real application. Okay, it's quite complicated because it's a result of a big system, okay, and it's actually nothing. Okay. It's actually nothing because many other systems use much bigger table, and they have bigger number of table or entity. Okay, so that's one example. Okay, quite big. Now that's the conceptual model. So when we want to use that model for real application, we need to translate that model into physical model. It means we have translated that models into a real database. Entity will be tables. You might remember that. Okay, so what we need to consider for translating that model into a real application. You probably remember, I already mentioned this earlier. First, you need to know the volume of the data, daily volume, how many data will be added every day. Okay. Who will have access to the data, and what kind of access? Can user change the value? Can user only read the value? Or can user delete the value? Or can user add them? On some application, for example, you may add new data, change the existing data, or delete the data. But for some others, they could only read the data to look at the data. For example, salesperson could only look at price, sales price. They could not change the sales price. The sales price is what it is. If it's say 10,000 rupiah per unit, that's 10,000 rupiah per unit. Okay. Credit status of a customer. If a customer doesn't have credit status, then salesperson could not change that. Okay. Who can change credit status? If you remember your accounting forensic system, is the credit manager. They could give a customer credit facility. They could change the amount of credit given. They could revoke that credit facility, things like that. Okay. Some could add something, some data, but could not change or delete the data. For example, if you go to the supermarket, This is actually usually happen in supermarket. And when the cashier on the checkout counter entering the wrong data, I actually experienced this few weeks ago. So I bought coriander leaves, and the cashier put in the transaction for celery, because coriander leaf is similar to celery in form. It's just that they have different smell and also different price. So then the cashier immediately realized that she entered the wrong code for that product. So instead of coriander leaf, it displays celery. She could not change that because it's already entered into the system. So she need to ask her supervisor to change that, to delete the celery, and then she could enter the correct product to the system. Okay, so that's the access usage access privilege. Okay, similar to your grade. I could change your grade. I could submit new grade, but and you can see it, but you cannot change it. Only me that can change that. And even though I could change your grade, once I submit it for every semester, for example, if I need to change that, I need to make a statement, written statement, why I need to change that. Okay, because it will be recorded. So let me give you some example. This is happening more than 20 years ago when I was still junior lecturer. I remember vividly because it was my last day in the faculty before I went for my study. Okay, so the head of administrative unit at that time called me into his office and asking me this question. Pak Samyadi, did you change the grade for this student on this subject? I said to him, because as usual, we lecturers have more than one student, so I could not remember. So I need to check my file. So I checked my files, and I said to the Pak Bowo at that time, the head of administrative unit, said, no, Pak Bowo, the student's grade is D. Okay, so the student got D from me. And then Pak Bowo said, but in our record, it says B instead of D. And I said, what? So we compare notes. At that time, the procedure to change grade was, for me, so there is a table with the student ID, student names, and the grade. If I want to change the grade, I need to cross out the grade and then write down the new grade, and I need to put on my initial, my signature next to the new grade, and also the date I changed it. And we look at the form at that time, because back in those days, everything was done with hard copy. So I saw a signature near the new grade from D to B was not my signature. Somebody else, I don't know who. Okay, so somebody changed the grade. Apparently, one of the administrative staff did that, and that's the mark for his son. The story was his son admitted into Atmajaya and got scholarship, and that students need to keep certain GPA to keep the scholarship. If that's below, if his GPA fell below certain threshold, he will lose scholarship. So his father changed that for him. Okay. So, and it was get caught because somebody else actually checking the grid and also checking the change unit. Nowadays, it's different. Everything done by computerized. Let me show you this. You probably never seen this before. Let me. Okay. Let me show you this. Have you ever seen this? Anybody ever seen this before? No?
Not
Yes? Okay. Okay.
Not yet, sir.
Okay. But you're familiar with SIATMA, right?
yes, sir.
Okay. So this is the back side of SIATMA. If you look at this columns here, download form for midterm. So I download this, for example. This is the form for your midterm exam. I'll use your class as an example. So, okay, I'll share my desktop then. Okay, can you see this? This is the empty empty form of your midterm grades. Okay, I just fill it all the number here, okay. And then let me change that to so this is the form that I have been filled. Okay, so this is your mark. Then with this, what I need to do is to upload the mark. So this is your mark. Okay, and you can see here there is a warning. I could not upload midterm exam mark because it has been sent. Okay, so if I want to change this, I need to do some procedures that it will record who requested the change, what kind of a change that, and the reason why I need to change that. Okay, so this is your midterm exam mark, and I already sent it to the system. Okay, I don't know when it will appear on your SIATMA, but this is the mark. Okay, so that is how this university control the data and secure the data, because students' academic data is the most important data in any education institution. Okay. You come to Atmajaya and you enroll into this program because you trust Atmajaya's reputation as a good university. Okay. If, for example, Atmajaya was known for students could change their mark willy-nilly anytime they don't like the mark, they can change it, then whatever came out from Atmajaya wouldn't be trusted by our society, by anybody else. Okay. So if somebody else look at the transcript from Atmajaya, this is rubbish. It's could not be trusted because everybody can change that anytime they want. But since we try to secure and keep the integrity of our data processing, especially the academic data, when you graduated with your transcript and it says GPA 3.9 or 4.0, people believe that you deserve that GPA. And that's because you enroll in a class, you did all the assignment, you sit on all exams, and you get good grades. People believe that because the integrity of that academic data being kept. Okay. That's why, as you may look, as you may see, everything being recorded in our system. When I uploaded your marks or grades, it will be processed and it will appear on your SIATMA after that. Okay. And if I want to change that, as you may already see, I could not change that after I send the mark to the system. If I want to change that, I have to make some written request, has to be approved by so many people. So it's very difficult to falsify that process. Okay, that's it for today. Any question? No? Okay, if there's no question, I think that's it for today. Please prepare your presentation on information required by the users of your application and what those information will be used for next week. Okay, so see you next week.